Hey everybody, welcome to the New Market Alliance Church podcast, where you're invited to not just attend church or watch church or, in this case, listen to church, but actually go and be the church. For everything you need to know about our community, be sure to go to newmarketalliance.ca and maybe even drop us a line to let us know you're listening. We read everything you send and we'll be sure to get back to you. Our worship service happens every Sunday at 10 a.m. in person or streaming online. We want you to know you absolutely matter to God, and you absolutely matter to us. Everyone is welcome and wanted. Now, let's join today's teaching.
As I was thinking this week about, this heart for the relationship series, and, which some of you thought may never end, I had still all of this holy discontent I have about a culture. See, I'm a sweaty guy, but you can hear this fan in here. That's no good. That's no good, is it? I'm just going to have to be a sweaty guy, and you're going to have to just deal with it. All right. It was a nice idea, and it felt nice, but it's like a Darth Vader voice, which we don't want. Again, a holy discontent about where the culture is sort of moving us. I won't bore you with the various statistics. I'm sure you know them. You know this even in your gut, that we are more lonely, more detached, more self-sufficient than ever. And I came across a podcast this last week where two pastors were actually discussing a bit of a dilemma that was very familiar to us as pastoral staff here at NAC. They had gotten a request at their church, a family asking them if they do baptisms. And this caught my attention as we just had a record number of baptisms at Easter, and we have at least 6 more next Sunday. And so I hope if any Christian church worth its salt is asked, do you do baptisms? The answer would be an unequivocal, absolutely we do baptisms. We're in the baptism business. But the question that this family asked had a tone of, and I like I say, we've experienced this before, like, do you do baptisms in the same way someone might ask, like, do you do tire rotations, right? It's a similar kind of thing when a call comes, like, I've been asked, we need to get our kid done. And I know what they mean. They want most likely to have, what they saw in the movie or in their upbringing, a christening, an infant baptism, or in our context, a child dedication. But anyway, the caller to these pastors on the podcast said, what we want is we want a private in-home baptism. Like, we don't want to come to church and we don't want to have to sit through a worship service. We just want you to come to our house and do this for us. Now, these pastors didn't have any relationship with the person. They didn't know them. I imagine they were just sort of Googling churches in the neighborhood. And you could say they were looking for a service, not a worship service, not a Sunday worship service, something closer to a tire rotation. A religious goods and services. Now, this still gets us talking as pastors about what is the right thing to do, Someone is asking for a noble thing, but doesn't seem to really get it. And then on the podcast, one of the pastors relays how a couple days later, he's talking to some friends, and they were asking him how church is going, and then they said, and this is a conversation I've experienced more than a few times, and I'll bet some of you have as well. Their friends said, actually, we've kind of found that we don't really need to go to church anymore. There are all these YouTubers who are basically doing these little sermons and little clips that we really like, and that's kind of taken the place of church for us. And they said, it's really great because all the stuff we don't like about church, we don't have to do anymore. We don't have to make small talk with people. And there's nobody that we have to get into arguments with. Does this sound familiar to anyone? We've had these kind of conversations. don't raise your hand to this question, but I wonder how many of us in this room have briefly considered that option as well. Falling in love with Jesus is not that surprising. Like, he's irresistible. Truly loving the people around you, as different as we are, like, that's a real miracle. And these two very relatable interactions from the podcast are illustrative of a lot of people who are looking for ways to opt out of community, because there's this online, in-home, private experience that takes out all the rough bits of community. You know, it makes it convenient, smoother. And I can't help but think that there's something really lost when we are approaching community and relationships like this because we want them convenient. As though faith is sort of about what, you know, like a transfer of information. And maybe the whole point of community is that, like, sometimes it kind of sucks. And sometimes you have to work through things with annoying people. And that's part of the beauty of it. Not just sort of wanting to make it work for your preferences or comfort. Perhaps if maybe you're an introvert like me or a reader like me, and you could be tempted to just base your spiritual needs off podcasts or books. I mean, this is the illusion of late modernity. You know, everything becomes just an individual expression. So spirituality is like, I don't know, doing your exercises and taking your vitamins. Like, it's something we check off. And if church is involved at all, you hope to go to a church, I guess, where everyone in your family sort of gets what they want. Their needs are met. But that's not really community. I would say that's closer to an association. And I mean, we use it interchangeably. I use it interchangeably. The scientific community, the LGBT community, the gaming community, the small business community. And I've been thinking, I use the word community where what I should really be saying is an association. Like, we live in a very high-tech digital society where you can have associations without any of the old, you know, accoutrements of what community really entails. And so it's actually an important theological question for us, like, is biblical community something more than just another voluntary association? Well, I would say absolutely it is. It's more. In fact, they're not even in the same ballpark, really. If you're in a voluntary association, you never want it to be too costly. If it costs too much in time and energy and relational tension and things like that, you're out. Like you will quickly associate somewhere else. And yet, community demands all those things. Maybe this is the thing that we tiptoe around because it's not really a great advertisement for church. But the thing about community is it's dependent on obligation. You have to feel obligated to a people. You don't have community if you don't have obligation. The whole point of voluntary association is you're not really obligated. And now, the digital form of this is amazing because I don't even have to see your face. You know, I don't even have to deal with the obligation. We're ghosting you now. We're not even coming to church anymore. So back to this baptism request, and the pastors on the podcast were joking. You know, they were like, well, let's tell them if they want to be baptized, they have to listen to my boring, janky sermon first. And the point being is like, you got to get in there in the grittiness of the church experience. You are being baptized into the body of Jesus Christ, and therefore the community that is his body should be present for that. Every now and then, the Germans, they have a word that is just a better word. It's one word that encompasses more than one English word can fully express, right? I'm glad Andre's not here, or is he? Because he would correct my pronunciation, but like schadenfreude, what a great word. Instead of saying secretly rejoicing in the failure of the prideful who have been hoisted on their own petard, you can say schadenfreude. And Martin Luther chose to use this word gemende. Oh man, see, I practiced it before I came out here. Gemende. Somebody, is Mike in the room? Say it again. Gemeinde. I was going like, Gemeinde your own business. That was how I was going to remember. Gemeinde. Gemeinde, which is the opposite of what it means, actually. Martin Luther chose the word Gemeinde when translating the Greek word ecclesia into Scripture for German. In English, ecclesia means the assembly, the called out ones, most commonly church. There's actually another German word for church, Kirche. But Luther chose this word, Gemeinde, because there's some nuance to it. It emphasizes shared faith and relational bonds and mutual accountability. He was rightly translating the meaning of church, not so much as an institution, certainly not a building, but a living body of people. It's the community where Jesus Christ is present. And so a voluntary society cannot be the Gemeinde in that definition. Some even say Jesus Christ is found in the Gemeinde, in the community that shares each other's lives deeply. And we were created for this, to have our lives bound with one another and for one another. So we are to be taken into a community, an actual community of people, not a community of, individuals identifying on the Canada census as Caucasian or middle class or even Christian in name, but an actual life community that we share deeply in each other's lives. Things like, listening to my boring sermon, done in community, to participate in what some of our more liturgical brothers and sisters call the sacrament of the word. And to do that with brothers and sisters in the faith, with a pastor to proclaim the word. You need a community to uphold that word and embody it and live that out and practice it before each other. I like how the Message translation puts this Colossians passage. Listen to this. Let the peace of Christ keep you in tune with each other, in step with each other. None of this going off and doing your own thing. And cultivate thankfulness. Let the word of Christ, the Message, have the run of the house. Give it plenty of room in your lives. Instruct and direct one another using a good common sense, and sing your hearts out to God. Now, I know I'm kind of harping on baptism and child dedication, but it's actually kind of absurd to leave out God's body from it. It turns into like a superstition or like some sort of weird Civil War reenactment, Like, hey, it'd be kind of fun to do this religious activity. We'll have a cake and we can dress up and we'll do kind of, like a Civil War reenactment. Like, we don't want any of the people. We just want you to say the words and keep away the bad juju or whatever. We're not sure we actually believe this, but just in case, we'll get the fire insurance. But there's something very different in the sacramental act of baptism. It is not a superstition. It is not, it is giving yourself over to a larger story that gets reverberated and manifested continually in the lives of the community, in the lives of the saints. I mean, we don't say this a lot as Protestants, but to be baptized is to be taken up and pulled into the life of the saints, the ones who have gone before us, who have been baptized themselves, and now are awaiting the return of Christ as we are awaiting the return of Christ. But it is the church as the ecclesia, the Gemeinde, as the community, as the household that lives this out together. That's the language of the New Testament. It's never about institutions or buildings or taking attendance. It's always language of family. Check out Ephesians 2:19. So now you are no longer strangers, talking to us as Gentiles. You are no longer foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, speaking of Germans, speaking to maybe his favorite topic of community, which I think we've taken to new levels in 2026 of not understanding what costly community is. And he talks about cheap community and costly community. And costly community involves obligation. And at a church like ours, we try to make it so easy to participate. We try to remove barriers. We try to make it so that, hey, you can come to our church and you don't have to make coffee and you don't have to teach Sunday school and you don't have to give or serve or step outside your comfort zone. But could it be we are then cheapening community itself by playing sort of the voluntary, participatory association game? I think it's not just a theological reality, but a sociological reality, that to have community, you have to have some level of obligation. And sometimes it's costly. Like, I don't even mean obligation as in give your money to the church and come to all the prayer meetings and events. Sometimes obligation looks more like this. Are you willing to let others really know you? To really know your story? And that doesn't mean you have to do that in the first 10 minutes of coming to NAC. But at some point, to be really in this community, there's a confession of your brokenness. There's showing your vulnerability, your unmasked self. You have to allow your humanity to be held by someone else. And I just wonder if this kind of participation in each other's suffering doesn't kind of knit us together in a certain way that carries the promise of obligation, if you will. I think when we went late a few months ago and we gathered to pray for a woman named Cheryl, and there was vulnerability and there was tears and we cried out to God together. It's a taste of what I'm trying to articulate today. I tend to be someone, and look, this is just my own sinful nature, who doesn't like obligation. Like, obligation's very hard for me, and in part, that's just sin nature, and in part, being an introvert, and in part, just being formed in part of this late modern culture. But there's something that knits together our spirits when we share in each other's messy life. So the obligation I'm talking about here is not to please God. This is not a works-based thing. It's not about obeying the law, but the obligation gets turned from vertical to horizontal, My obligation is now to Grant, to Doug, to Paul, to Jenna. And you can't sit, I suppose, in your living room and watch episodes of the NAC TV show. You need to sit with these people, hear their stories, open yourself up to them, know their heart, have your heart known. I'll say this as plainly as I can. Being a part of a community will not be the answer to anyone's problems, okay? Only Jesus is. And in fact, in many ways, it might create more problems. It's often easier to live in isolation. It's neater, it's cleaner. Relationships require of us. But true community is often the context where God shows up and meets you where you are, doubts and struggles and all. And so God shows up in the faces of those who are walking alongside you. He shows up in the love and the support of others in community. And even when God feels absent in my life, being in the presence of those who aren't in the same dry place as I am, for whom God feels very present, that can be healing for me. Again, don't mishear me. Community is one of the things I need. It's not all I need. Community can even become an idol, just like anything else. What I really need is God. I need him, and I need a community to point me to him, not to itself. Biblical community rightly lived out doesn't point to itself. It doesn't point to Knack. It doesn't point to my small group or Jonathan. It points to Jesus. Tom Clegg and Warren Bird, Christian authors and academics, said that people have these three fundamental needs. The need for transcendence, that is, the need to connect with the Creator God. God has put eternity into the hearts of men, whether they know it or not. We have the need for significance, right? To have purpose in life, to do something meaningful. And they say we have this need for community, the need to connect with others through deeply satisfying relationships. That's just how we're wired. Even atheists need community. And I believe once they find love in God's people, they'll inevitably find God. In fact, we truly come to understand ourselves in the context of a safe, Christ-centered, loving, and honest Christian community. It's where our quirkiness sometimes rubs up against others' quirkiness. It's where spiritual gifts are discovered and affirmed. And the stuff you can't, it just can't happen online. It's one thing to watch a worship performance. You can do that online. But the internet can't help you move into your new apartment, right? The internet can't deliver food made with love when you've had a baby. The internet can't hug you tight when you've lost someone you love. Only a close community can do that. And by the way, we just recognize that there are those who literally have to join us online because of issues that are no fault of their own, be it health or travel or others. And so may there be no condemnation as I say this. I know my friends Keith and Elizabeth, for instance, are just longing to be reunited with many people. Some of the most difficult days they've faced have been less about cancer and treatment, invasive treatments. It's been more about isolation, which, only goes to my point. And maybe it seems odd to be sort of, preaching to or scolding the choir. You've all shown up after all, and thank you for that. But in fairness, I do say every week that this vision of ours is a lot more than coming to a building, attending a church service. In fact, you can show up and be totally disengaged from community. We see that. I might even push further and ask you this. If Jesus does, in fact, inhabit the praise of his people, if we are, in fact, his body, his children, if those things are true, and you are feeling disconnected from God, is it possible that you are in fact disconnected from his body? I'm not sure those things can be, disentangled from each other too easily. So as I wrap up this series and I think about today's particular theme of this family, this community, this gathering of the saints, this Gemeinde. What is my problem? I'm thinking, what is a metaphor or illustration that we could end on today? What would point to this vision of healthy biblical community? Sometimes I wonder if we should take more cues from our South American brothers and sisters. Sometimes I check in on our Spanish sister church, NACE. They meet here on Saturday nights. And there is something in that culture that they just intrinsically get more than a typical Canadian. A posture of hospitality and affection and breaking bread together regularly. I learned of a custom in Argentina. Any World Cup fans, Messi fans? No? Good? Okay. All right. It's a custom in many South American cultures, I'm told, of what happens when a child gets separated from their parent in a busy outdoor setting. The kind of community response that happens is beautiful. There's a young boy named Juan Cruz, and he became separated from his father, Eduardo, in this crowded outdoor plaza in Buenos Aires. But as soon as they begin walking, I'm told, like children are taught what to do if they're away from home and they are separated from their caretaker. They're told to find the nearest adult, tell them they've lost their parent or guardian and they need help finding them. And what happens next is simply beautiful. This stranger, this adult, then picks up the child, puts them on their shoulders, and they begin shouting, "Lost, lost," along with the child's name or the parent's name. Well, what happens then is everybody else around them, strangers, join in. And they start clapping and shouting, "Lost, lost," and they attract the parents' attention to come forward and reunite with their lost child. What we need from you, even though this is vulnerable and risky, is for you to be honest enough with someone that you are lost, that you are drifting, that you're thinking of abandoning community because you don't feel seen or loved. I understand that's a vulnerable thing to do. And church, what we need to do is to lift them up, to speak their name, to come around them, chant their name in unison, so to speak. I know we have had a lot of hit and misses at NAC in launching and relaunching small groups, the onboarding processes. It's harder than it sounds to play matchmaker with people interested in small groups. I'm telling you, we are not going to abandon it. As flawed as the logistics of it may be, look for some changes in the fall. In the meantime, I'm so grateful for groups that have taken the initiative to be, organic. Groups like John and Audrey and the Changs and Wally and Dawn Marie and Norm and Mai and Michelle and Jason, and they're always on the lookout for new people, it seems, and unconnected people, inviting them into the group. Thank you. Thank you. You are literally doing the Lord's work. And I encourage you all to not just gather, but to find a way to lovingly get all up in each other's business, to go deep, to be vulnerable, to be authentic.